Hello, and thanks for joining us for this episode of Into the Killing. In this week's episode, we'll look at 3 Canadian cases that were solved after decades. But before we get into the cases, we want to tell you that if you know of an interesting cold case you would like us to cover on Into the Killing, please visit our website, criminallylisted.com. Then go to the Suggest a Case page. You can also suggest cases for our 2 YouTube channels, Criminally Listed and Paranormally Listed. For the first case in this episode, we're going back to May 1971. On May 1st, 1971, Raphael Minicillo walked out of a jail in Rome, Italy. 18 months earlier, on October 31st, 1969, Minicillo was supposed to go to a court-martial trial. Minicillo was born in Italy and immigrated to the United States when he was a teenager. He joined the Marine Corps and served in Vietnam. He was awarded the Purple Heart. Problems arose when 19-year-old Minicillo returned to Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton in Oceanside, California in April 1969. He believed that he was shorted $200 in pay. In May 1969, Minicillo broke into the camp's post exchange and he stole $200 worth of watches and radios. But he was caught and court-martialed. On the day he was supposed to go to trial, he went to the Los Angeles International Airport and boarded Trans World Airlines Flight 85, which was heading to San Francisco. He had a carry-on bag containing a disassembled M1 rifle and 250 rounds of ammunition. He put the gun together in the plane's washroom. When he exited the washroom with the gun, he ordered the crew to fly him to New York City. First they stopped at Denver, Colorado, and the passengers were released. Then they went to New York, but that wasn't his final destination. The plane refueled again in New York and they took off for Bangor, Maine. Then they stopped in Shannon, Ireland, and finally, they landed in Rome. When Minicillo got off the plane in Rome, he took a police officer hostage, and they stole a police car. He hid out in a church for a couple days, then he was arrested. Minicillo became a folk hero in Italy. Many people thought he was handsome. The Italian government refused to hand Minicillo over to the United States, where he was looking at the death penalty. Instead, he was tried for crimes committed in Italian airspace. He was convicted and sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. He appealed and his sentence was reduced to 18 months, leading to him being released on May 1st, 1971. Minicillo became a minor celebrity in Italy. He was set to star in a spaghetti western, but that never panned out. Instead, he became a waiter. Minicillo currently lives outside of Napoli, Italy. At 18 hours, his hijacking is considered the longest plane hijacking in history. On May 4th, 1971, most of the 1,266 citizens living in Saint-Jean-Venay, Quebec, were settling in for the night. Suddenly, there was a landslide, and a sinkhole that was 3.5 million square feet large and 49 to 98 feet deep opened up. 42 houses were destroyed, and 31 people were killed. 13 bodies have never been recovered. It turned out that the village was built on unstable clay and soil. The previous month, the area experienced heavy rainfall, which made the ground unstable. After the disaster, the village was abandoned. On May 12, 1971, Rolling Stones lead singer Mick Jagger married Bianca Perez Mora Macias in Saint-Tropez, France. Bianca was the daughter of a Nicaraguan businessman. Mick and Bianca met in France at a Rolling Stones after show in September 1970. When they got married, Bianca was 4 months pregnant. There were only 75 guests at the wedding, including Paul McCartney, Ringo Starr, and Ronnie Wood. One of the more notable aspects of the wedding was that Bianca wore an Yves Saint Laurent skirt suit instead of a gown. Mick and Bianca stayed married for about 7 years. Mick was not faithful to his wife. In 1977, he started dating model Jerry Hall, who would go on to be his longtime partner. In 1978, Bianca filed for divorce, citing adultery as the reason. At the time of this recording, Bianca is the only woman Mick Jagger has officially married. On May 14, 1971, number 1 at the box office were 2 movies featured as a double bill. They were the 1969 comedy Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, and the 1968 screwball comedy Cactus Flower. The number 1 song was the rock classic Joy to the World by Three Dog Night. In May 1971, the Topic family lived in Windsor, Ontario. Windsor is situated on the Detroit River. Across the river is downtown Detroit, Michigan. The family came to live in Windsor about 5 years earlier from Yugoslavia. In 1971, Windsor had a population of nearly 210,000 people. It had a community of about 10,000 people from Yugoslavia. Luka Topic worked at the Ford Motor Company, which was about 100 feet from their home. His wife, Paula, was a homemaker. Luka and Paula had 3 children, 8-year-old Svenko, 6-year-old Ljubica, and 5-year-old Mariana. On May 14, 1971, Luka was working the afternoon shift at the plant. Svenko and Ljubica were outside their house playing with a group of about 10 children. Around 8 p.m., Ljubica ran into her house and asked her mother if she could take some candy out to the other kids. Paula said yes, but told her not to stay out late. We're just going to take a quick break from this episode to bring you a word from our amazing sponsor, Uncommon Goods. If you haven't finished your holiday shopping yet, don't panic. There's still time to find an incredible, original gift with the help of Uncommon Goods. UncommonGoods.com has the absolute best gifts for everyone in your life. We're talking moms, dads, teens, in-laws, besties, your one and only. And it's not stuff you can find just anywhere. Uncommon Goods has unique and creative gifts, often homemade by independent artists and makers. So skip the gifts that scream last minute and find something truly original at UncommonGoods.com. Here are some of my favorite things from their site. The popcorn bowl with kernel sifter. This is a must-have gift for people who eat popcorn, which we do in our house. It's so clever, you have to check it out. Another great gift that we're going to make an annual tradition in our house is the Christmas Nightmare at-home murder mystery. It's a great gift for people who love mysteries, games, and Christmas. Last year for my parents, we got them a love box spinning heart messenger, and they love it. It allows you to send messages to a wooden box with a heart on it. The heart spins when the message is received. You should check it out because it's way cooler than I make it sound. And these are just a few of the amazing gifts I found on Uncommon Goods. You should spend some time scrolling through UncommonGoods.com because you'll find some really unique gifts for everyone in your life. It's also easy to shop there and deliveries have never been a problem. It certainly beats going to a busy store, especially because you'll find things there that you'll never find in the store. Uncommon Goods specifically looks for unique, high-quality products. They are usually made in the USA or they're handmade. You won't find a better selection of meaningful, out-of-the-ordinary gifts anywhere. I've never had any problems with Uncommon Goods shipping me anything, but if you're worried about something getting lost in the mail or not arriving on time, Uncommon Goods has amazing virtual classes. This includes awesome classes like tarot card reading, lunar astrology charting, cooking and mixology classes, crafts, gardening, and so much more. I've mentioned this before, but I can't stress it enough. They have something for everyone. Whether you're looking to buy for kids or senior citizens or everyone in between, they have everything from art and jewelry to kitchen, home, and bar. It's mind-blowing how much amazing stuff they have. Plus, you can feel good about shopping at Uncommon Goods because with every purchase you make at Uncommon Goods, they give back $1 to a nonprofit, and you get to choose where the money is donated. At the time of this recording, they've donated more than $2.5 million. To get 15% off your next gift, go to uncommongoods.com/listed. That's uncommongoods.com/listed for 15% off. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Uncommon Goods. We're all out of the ordinary. Around 9 p.m., Paula went outside to get her 2 eldest children. Svetko was there, but Ljubica was gone. Svetko told his mother that a man had approached them from the restaurant across the road. He asked Ljubica if he wanted to come with him and help him with a job. He said he would pay her $8. He then gave Svetko a dime and told him to ride his bike in the opposite direction of him and Ljubica. Then he and Ljubica walked off hand in hand. Paula immediately started searching for her 6-year-old daughter, but found no trace of her. She saw a police car, so she stopped the officers and told them that her daughter was missing. Soon, police officers and neighbors were searching for the 6-year-old girl. Her father, Luka, left work and joined the search. Around 1 a.m., about 4 hours after Ljubica went missing, her body was found in a backyard about 4 blocks from her home. Her body was found close to a gate to an alleyway. The police believe that she was killed in the alleyway and then the killer dumped her body in the backyard. Ljubica's death had been brutal. She had been beaten and several teeth were broken. Her right leg was also broken. She had also been sexually assaulted. The cause of death had been strangulation. The citizens of Windsor were shocked by the crime. Many people were angry and they were looking for vigilante justice. However, the police didn't have any suspects. They got a description of the killer from Svetko. He was in his early 20s, slim, between 5'10" and 6 feet tall, had short blonde hair, and he was clean shaven. The police released a sketch, but that didn't generate any leads. It wasn't long before the case went cold. Life, as it always does, moved on. Luca and Paula had another child, Tatiana. Between 1971 and 2015, the case was reopened 6 times, but sadly, no progress was made. In 2015, the police revealed that they found something at the crime scene that could help solve the case. It was an adult's tooth, an incisor that had broken off at the gum line. They had never made that information public because they wanted to use it to eliminate suspects. They sent the tooth plus other evidence for DNA testing. A profile was created. The DNA was put into a national database, but no match was found. The DNA was then sent to DNA technology company Parabon Nanolabs. In 2016, based on the DNA, they created a composite image of the killer. They determined that he was fair-skinned, he had brown eyes, and dark hair. But once again, the advancement generated no leads. Three more years passed. It had been 48 years since 6-year-old Ljubica Topic had been killed. In 1971, the 3 biggest films at the American box office was the musical Fiddler on the Roof, the western Billy Jack, and the classic crime film The French Connection. In 2019, the 3 top movies were all from Disney. They were Avengers Endgame, the remake of The Lion King, and Toy Story 4. In fact, the top 6 movies were all Disney films. The other 3 in order were Frozen 2, Captain Marvel, and Star Wars Episode 9, The Rise of the Skywalker. In 1971, the biggest song of the year was the #1 song when Ljubica was killed, Joy to the World by Three Dog Night. The second biggest song was Maggie May by Rod Stewart, which was followed by It's Too Late by Carole King. 2019's 3 biggest songs were Old Town Road by Lil Nas X featuring Billy Ray Cyrus, Sunflower by Post Malone and Sway Lee, and Without Me by Halsey. In 1971, only one of those artists was born, and that was Billy Ray Cyrus, who was 9 when Ljubica was murdered. Some popular books published in 1971 were Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson, The Lorax by Dr. Seuss, and The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. Popular books published in 2019 were Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid, Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell, and The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, which is the sequel to her classic 1985 novel, The Handmaid's Tale. By 2018, the most important change in the world of criminology was the development of genetic genealogy, which became a crime-fighting tool that year. In December 2018, the police announced that they had finally solved Ljubica's murder thanks to genetic genealogy. However, the police said they would not be releasing the name of the killer. They said that he had recently died, so therefore he could not be charged with any crime, and naming him would violate his rights to privacy. Many people were not happy to hear this. The Windsor Star and the CBC repeatedly asked for the name to be made public, but they were denied each time. In March 2022, the Windsor Police Department got a new police chief. He allowed for the information to be released. In February 2023, the information was made public. The killer's name was Frank Arthur Hall. He was 22 at the time of the murder, and he lived on the same street as the Topic family. He lived about 1.25 miles away from the family. He was never considered a suspect in the case. He left Windsor sometime after the murder and settled in Edmonton, Alberta. He He died in February 2019 at the age of 70. He died just months before he was linked to the murder. When his family was notified that he was responsible for such a brutal murder, they were shocked. They had no idea he was capable of committing such a terrible act. The police think it's possible that Hall committed other crimes. The police hope that by making his name public, people can link him to these crimes if he did in fact commit other crimes. Ljubica's family was surprised that the case was finally solved because they never thought that the case would ever be solved. Unfortunately, Ljubica's father and younger sister, Mariana, were not around to see the case be closed. Her father died in 1990 and her sister died in 2018. For our second case, we're going back to August 1983. On August 14, 1983, Johnny Ramone, one of the founding members of the legendary punk band The Ramones, was nearly killed. Johnny, born John Cummings, was the band's lead guitarist during their 22-year tenure as a band. On the night of August 13, 1983, the Ramones were playing a show in their hometown of Queens, New York. After the show, Johnny returned to his East Village apartment. He found a woman he used to date, Cynthia Whitney, sitting on a porch outside the building. She was very intoxicated. She was with 22-year-old Seth Macklin, the lead singer of the punk band Sub-Zero Construction. Johnny was supposedly concerned with Whitney's well-being and told her to leave Macklin and come inside. Macklin didn't like this idea, and the two men started fighting. Macklin kicked Johnny in the head and fractured his skull. At first, Johnny declined medical attention, but he was ultimately taken to the hospital and underwent emergency brain surgery. Macklin was arrested for first-degree assault. Johnny fully recovered and played with the band until 1996 when they officially disbanded. Between 1974 and 1996, the Ramones released 14 studio albums. It's unclear what the results of Macklin's charges were. On August 17, 1983, Hurricane Alicia made landfall on Galveston Island, Texas. It was the first hurricane to make landfall in the United States in 3 years. 21 people were killed, and it caused $3 billion in damage. On August 18, 1983, 36-year-old Douglas Crabb was drinking at the Inland Motel Bar near the base of Uluru in Northern Territory, Central Australia. Crabb worked as a truck driver. After about an hour, he was cut off because he was too drunk. Crabb got into his 25-ton Mack truck, which had 2 trailers attached to it. He drove a short distance and unhitched one trailer. He then drove back to the bar, attached to the Inland Motel. There were about 50 patrons inside the bar. Crabb drove his truck into the bar. 4 people were killed at the scene, and another one died at the hospital. Another 16 were injured. After driving his truck into the bar, Crabb got out and ran away. He was arrested the next day. Crabb was convicted on 5 counts of murder, and he was given 5 life sentences with a non-parole period of 30 years. He became eligible for parole in 2013. In 2023, at age 70, he was transferred to a minimum security prison to participate in a pre-release resocialization program. The number 1 song on August 17, 1983 was the classic Every Breath You Take by The Police. The number 1 movie in America was the road trip comedy National Lampoon's Vacation. In August 1983, 45-year-old Susan Tice was going through some life changes. Susan and her husband, Fred, had just moved back to Toronto, Ontario in June 1983. They had spent the previous 3 years in Calgary, Alberta. They had moved to Calgary from Toronto for Fred's job. He worked for an investment firm. In the spring of 1983, he was promoted to vice president and brought back to the head office in Toronto. Fred and Tina met at McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario in the late 1950s. The couple had 1 daughter and 3 sons. Many of their friends didn't know that when they returned to Toronto, Susan and Fred split up and they moved into separate residences. In August 1983, Susan, with a master's in social work, was looking for a job. On the weekend of August 12th, Susan went out of town for a canoe trip. She returned home on August 14th. On August 15th, Susan didn't show up for a family event. Her family tried to contact her for 2 days, but they couldn't reach her. On August 17th, her brother-in-law went to her house to check on her. He looked in her mail slot and saw that several days of mail had piled up. He got inside and discovered that the house had been ransacked. He made his way to the bedroom and found Susan's dead body. He called the police. Susan had been sexually assaulted and stabbed 13 times in the chest. She had also been beaten in the head. The police talked to the neighbors. One of them said that they had been sleeping 2 nights earlier and they were awoken by a woman screaming. However, they thought they had just dreamed it and they went back to sleep. The police found no signs of a break-in or forced entry. There were many expensive antiques in the house, but none were stolen. There was also cash lying out, but it wasn't stolen. The police thought that the $75 Susan had left over from the canoe trip had been stolen, but that was it. It wasn't long before the case went cold. "17 years went by, then, in 2000, a DNA profile of the killer was created from the evidence. It was entered into a national database and the police were surprised. There was a match. But it wasn't to a suspect. Instead, it was linked to another unsolved murder that happened 4 months after Susan was killed. 22-year-old Erin Gilmour came from a wealthy family. Her father, David Gilmour, made his fortune in mining. In 1996, he started the Fiji Bottled Water Company. In 1983, Erin lived alone in an apartment above the clothing store where she worked. She had been living in the apartment for about 2 months. Erin had dreams of being a fashion designer. In early December 1983, she had gone skiing in Aspen, Colorado. On December 20th, she had been back in Toronto for about a week. She worked at the store that day, then she went to her apartment. That night she was planning on going to a cocktail party. Her friend, who was the son of her father's business partner, was going to pick her up. When he arrived, he found the door to the apartment ajar. He went inside the apartment and found Erin in the bedroom. She had been bound, raped, and stabbed twice in the chest. He called for help, and Erin was rushed to the hospital, but the 22-year-old woman did not survive her injuries. One of the stab wounds pierced her heart. There were no signs of a break-in. The police believe that Erin opened the door expecting to find her friend, but instead it was the killer who overpowered her. In hindsight, the police saw several similarities between the two cases. Both victims were sexually assaulted and stabbed in their bedrooms. In both cases, there were no signs of a break-in. The victims lived less than 2 miles from each other. Each had only lived in their homes for about 2 months. Both women were members of well-to-do families. They both had recently gone out of town. While there were similarities between the two victims, the police couldn't find any connections between the two women that helped solve the case. So the cases went cold again. Another 22 years passed. In 1983, at the worldwide box office, the 3 biggest movies were Star Wars Episode VI, Return of the Jedi, Terms of Endearment, and Flashdance. 39 years later, the biggest movies were all sequels. They were Avatar, The Way of Water, Top Gun, Maverick, and Jurassic Park, Dominion. Each movie had earned over $1 billion. 1983's biggest singles were Every Breath You Take by The Police, Billie Jean by Michael Jackson, and Flashdance, What a Feeling by Erin. 2022, the 3 biggest singles were Heat Waves by Glass Animals, As It Was by Harry Styles, and Stay by Kid Laroi and Justin Bieber. None of those artists were alive when the murders were committed. Some popular books published in 1983 were Pet Sematary by Stephen King, Dear Mr. Henshaw by Beverly Cleary, and the controversial true crime book Fatal Vision by Joe McGinnis. 3 popular books published in 2022 were Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis, Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel, and I'm Glad My Mom Died by former child actress Jeanette McCurdy. As we mentioned earlier in the episode, in 2018, genetic genealogy began to be used as a crime investigation tool. In the cases of Susan Tice and Erin Gilmour, investigators narrowed it down to a set of 5 brothers. They managed to eliminate 4 of them as suspects. That left 61-year-old Joseph George Sutherland. Sutherland was 22 years old when the murders were committed, and he lived in Toronto. In 2022, he lived in Moosonee, a small town with about 1,500 people in northern Ontario. The town is called the Gateway to the Arctic. It's about 530 miles north of Toronto. In November 2022, the police collected a DNA sample from Sutherland. Before the results were in, Sutherland contacted a friend who was a retired police officer with the Ontario Provincial Police. He told them that the Toronto police had collected a sample of his DNA. He then confessed to his friend that he committed the 2 murders. His friend contacted the Toronto police and arranged for Sutherland to surrender himself. Sutherland was transported to Toronto and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. In October 2023, Sutherland pleaded guilty to murder and he was sentenced to life in prison. The police did not release much information about Sutherland. They said that after leaving Toronto, he lived in other places in Ontario, but they did not say where. The police did not believe that Susan Tice and Erin Gilmour knew each other, and neither of them knew Sutherland. The police did not publicly reveal how Sutherland came upon his victims. They also said that he had never been considered a suspect. He did not have a criminal record, so without the help of genetic genealogy, he may never have been caught. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Once again, if you have any cases you want to suggest for this podcast or our YouTube channels, please visit criminallylisted.com. But that's all for today. Thank you again for listening. Please stay safe and take care of yourself.